"Look at them," Lee whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They're not fighting back. They're just singing." "My people do not believe in violence," Kethora said sadly. "It is not our way. We thought your justice speakers would protect us. That is why we agreed to the arbitration." Hannah clenched her fists, feeling anger burn in her chest like a Stargo in supernova. "They will. I promise you that." The days blurred together in a haze of poor food and comfortable sleep, growing rage. Hannah used the time to gather information from other prisoners. She learned that Governor Park Min-ho had been planning this operation for over a year, carefully, placing his people in key positions throughout the colonial government. The fake terrorist charges were just the beginning. He intended to declare martial law and seize direct control of all Velta T. Territories. Torres visited their cell regularly, taking obvious pleasure in taunting the prisoners. He seemed particularly focused on Hannah, perhaps sensing that she posed the greatest threat to their operation. "You know what I love about this place," he said during one of his visits, leaning against the cell bars with a cruel smile. "No oversight, no bureaucrats breathing down our necks, just good old-fashioned frontier justice." "This isn't justice," Hannah replied coldly. "This is theft and murder." Torres laughed, the sound echoing off the metal walls. "You claim to be some big-shot judge. But look at you now. You're just another traitor rotting in a cage. No one's coming for you, lady. Your precious Galactic Justice Network doesn't even know you exist." But Torres was wrong, and he had no idea how wrong he was. Far above the planet's surface, in the depths of space, automated systems were already responding to Hannah's disappearance. Her judicial communicator had been designed with multiple redundancies. When it was destroyed, a backup beacon hidden in her robes had activated. When the robes were confiscated, a subdermal implant had taken over, broadcasting a biometric signature across the galaxy. The Galactic Justice Network operated on principles of absolute transparency and accountability. Every judge, every arbitrator, every judicial officer was tracked continuously. If one went dark, alarms sounded immediately. On the space station Deep Justice, orbiting Earth's moon, Master Control detected the anomaly within hours. Judge Kim Hannah's biometric signature had vanished from the network during what should have been a routine arbitration mission. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sending priority alerts to every judicial authority in human space. The first to respond was the emergency AI system, codenamed Themis. It immediately began analyzing the situation, cross-referencing Hannah's last known location with recent intelligence reports. What it found was disturbing. Colonial Governor Park Min-ho had been flagged multiple times for suspicious activity, but his reports had been buried in bureaucratic red tape. Within 6 hours, Themis had compiled a comprehensive threat assessment and transmitted it directly to the highest levels of the judicial hierarchy. The message was clear. Judge Kim Hannah was in immediate danger, and the situation on Kepler-4 was far worse than anyone had imagined. Chief Justice Yoon Ji-won received the alert while reviewing cases in her orbital office. As she read the report, her face grew pale. Hannah wasn't just a colleague. She was one of the most promising judges of her generation and a personal friend. The thought of her trapped on some frontier world, at the mercy of corrupt officials, made Ji-won's blood boil. But what truly shocked her was the scope of the conspiracy. According to Themis's analysis, the situation on Kepler-4 represented a complete breakdown of colonial authority. If left unchecked, it could spread to other frontier worlds, undermining the entire foundation of interstellar law. "Activate Protocol 7, Ji-won commanded, her voice echoing through the empty office. "Full judicial fleet deployment. I want every available ship ready for immediate departure." Hyde, a young man named Chen Wu, looked up from his desk in shock. "Ma'am, Protocol 7 hasn't been used in over a decade. Are you certain? Absolutely certain," Ji-won replied, her eyes hard as steel. "Send word to all colonial governors. The Supreme Court is taking direct action and get me. Admiral Park on the line. I want to speak with him personally." As the wheels of justice began to turn, Hannah remained trapped in her cell, unaware that help was coming. But she could feel something changing in the air, a subtle shift in the guards' behavior. They seemed nervous, constantly checking their communicators and whispering among themselves. "Something's happening," Lee observed quietly. "They're scared." Kefara's crystalline skin began to glow with a soft, hopeful light. "Perhaps the Star Mothers have heard our songs after all." Hannah smiled grimly. "Not the Star Mothers. Something much more dangerous to people like Governor Park." "What's that?" Lee asked. "The law," Hannah replied, "and it's coming." The Supreme Interstellar Court was a marvel of human engineering, a massive space station that orbited Earth like a second moon. Its central chamber housed the largest holographic display in human space, capable of showing real-time data from across the galaxy. Chief Justice Yoon Ji-won had stood in this chamber for 15 years, but she had never seen the display show such alarming information. Red warning lights pulsed across the three-dimensional star map, each one representing a breakdown in communication with judicial personnel. But at the center of it all, blazing like a dying star, was the dark zone around Kepler-4b. Judge Kim Hannah's signature had vanished completely, as if she had been erased from existence. "Themis, give me a full breakdown," Ji-won commanded, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her heart. The artificial intelligence's voice filled the chamber, calm and analytical. "Chief Justice, Judge Kim Hannah's biometric signature disappeared 72 hours ago. Her judicial communicator was destroyed. Backup beacon went offline. And her subdermal implant stopped transmitting simultaneously. This pattern indicates deliberate interference." Ji-won felt her blood run cold. Hannah wasn't just a colleague. She was like a younger sister. They had worked together for years, and Ji-won had personally recommended her for the Kepler-4b assignment. If something happened to her, the responsibility would be on Ji-won's shoulders. "What about Colonial Governor Park Min-ho?" she asked. "Suspicious activity detected," Themis replied. "Financial irregularities, unauthorized security operations, and multiple violations of interspecies protocols. Recommendation: immediate investigation and possible military intervention." Ji-won closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her. Protocol 7 was the nuclear option of interstellar law, a power that hadn't been used since the Tau Ceti Rebellion. It would grant her direct command authority over all human colonial forces, allowing her to override planetary governors and take military action. "Activate Protocol 7, she commanded, her voice echoing through the chamber like thunder. Full judicial fleet deployment to Kepler-4b. The chamber erupted in activity. Automated systems began broadcasting emergency signals across human space. Every military commander, every colonial governor, every judge and arbitrator in the galaxy received the same message. The Supreme Court was taking direct action. Admiral Park Soon-ho was in his quarters aboard the dreadnought Justice's Hammer when the alert reached him. A veteran of 3 interstellar wars, he had never seen a Protocol 7 activation. His hands shook slightly as he read the orders. "All hands, battle stations," he announced over the ship's intercom. "This is not a drill. We have a judicial emergency on Kepler-4b. Within minutes, the massive warship's engines roared to life. The Justice's Hammer was over a kilometer long, bristling with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. It was designed to fight entire fleets, but today it would serve as a sword of justice. 11 other ships joined the formation. Heavy cruisers, fast attack vessels, and specialized judicial enforcement craft. Each one carried hundreds of Marines, trained specifically for colonial law enforcement. Together, they formed the most powerful judicial fleet ever assembled. As the ships entered hyperspace, their quantum drives bending reality around them, Chief Justice Yoon Ji-won stood on the bridge of the Justice's hammer. Through the observation windows, she could see the swirling colors of hyperspace, a tunnel of light that would carry them across the galaxy in days instead of years. ETA Kepler to be. She asked Admiral Park, 67 hours at maximum speed. He replied, "But Chief Justice, are you sure about this? We're talking about military action against a human colony." Ji-won's face was granite. "Admiral, one of our judges is missing, and an entire species is being systematically oppressed. If that's not worth military action, then what is?" Meanwhile, on Kepler 440b, the Velta Elder Council was holding an emergency session. The ancient beings had lived for centuries, their crystalline bodies growing more complex with age. Elder Kethmara was the oldest among them, her form glowing, with patterns that told the story of her people's history. "The human arbitrator has not appeared for the scheduled talks," she announced, her voice creating harmonic resonances that made the chamber's walls vibrate. "This breach of protocol suggests interference by hostile elements." The other elders responded with complex musical phrases, their crystalline skin shifting colors to express their emotions. The consensus was clear. The humans could not be trusted to police themselves. What of the star swimmers? Estella, Velketh, a younger being whose form pulsed with nervous energy. Should we call them home? Kethmara's skin darkened to a deep purple, the color of ancient wisdom. "The star swimmers have been watching from the void. They know the crimes being committed against our people. It is time for them to act. In the depths of space, beyond the detection range of human senses, the Velta investigation fleet had been observing the colony for days. Their ships were unlike anything in human space, organic vessels that seemed to have been grown. Rather than built, they pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, their hulls covered in what looked like crystalline scales. The flagship was a massive creature ship called the Song of Stars, its interior filled with chambers that resonated with harmonic frequencies. Captain Zethar stood in the central command node, her ancient form connected to the ship's nervous system through tendrils of living crystal. "The human judge is imprisoned," she reported to the Elder Council through quantum entanglement communication. "Our people suffer while their corrupt leaders grow fat on our sacred crystals. Then it is time." Elder Kethmar replied across the void. "Approach the colony. Let them know that the Velta are not defenseless." Back in the detention facility, Hannah had been planning her next move when she felt a strange vibration through the station's hull. It was subtle at first, like a distant earthquake, but it grew stronger with each passing minute. Her Velta cellmates suddenly became agitated, their crystalline skin beginning to glow with excited patterns. They began to sing in harmony, their voices rising with hope for the first time since their imprisonment. "What is it?" Hannah asked, pressing her ear against the wall. The eldest Velta, Kethara, smiled for the first time since she had met him. "The songs of our star swimmers. They come through the facility's small windows." Prisoners began to see lights in the sky. At first, they looked like stars, but they moved with purpose, growing brighter as they approached the planet's surface. Lee Soman grabbed Hannah's arm. "Those aren't human ships. The design is completely different." Hannah felt a surge of hope mixed with concern. The Velta had their own military forces, but she had hoped to resolve this crisis without bloodshed. "How many ships?" "Dozens," Lee whispered. "Maybe hundreds. They're beautiful." The Velta ships descended through the atmosphere like living things, their bioluminescent hulls creating roar-like patterns in the sky. They moved with fluid grace, completely unlike the rigid formations of human vessels in the colony's command center. Governor Park Min-ho watched the approaching fleet with growing panic. His stolen fortune, his carefully laid plans, everything was falling apart. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the approaching vessels," his communications officer reported. "They're demanding the immediate release of all Velta prisoners, and the human arbitrator. Jam their signals," Park ordered, "and get me Admiral Torres. We may need to use force." But even as he spoke, Park knew it was too late. The sky was full of alien ships, and somewhere in the depths of space, human justice was racing toward his world at faster-than-light speed. In her cell, Hannah listened to the Velta songs of hope and felt something she hadn't experienced in days: optimism. The galaxy was vast, but justice had a way of finding those who tried to hide from it. "Hold on," she whispered to her fellow prisoners. "The cavalry is coming." The hyperspace tunnel collapsed in a brilliant flash of light as 12 massive warships materialized above Kepler-4b. The Justice's hammer led the formation, its kilometer-long hull bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Behind it came heavy cruisers, fast attack vessels, and specialized boarding craft, all bearing the silver and gold insignia of the Supreme Interstellar Court. Governor Park Min-ho was in his private office, counting projected profits from the quantum crystal operation, when his aide burst through the door without knocking. "Sir, we have a problem," the young man gasped, his face white with terror. "The entire judicial fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding immediate surrender." Park's blood turned to ice. Through his office window, he could see the massive shadows of the warships blocking out the iron sun. The ships were so large they created their own weather patterns, their engines causing windstorms across the colony's surface. "Impossible," Park whispered. "They can't just show up here. I'm the legally appointed governor of this colony." But even as he spoke, every communication device in the building crackled to life. Chief Justice Yoon Ji-won's voice filled every room, every corridor, every corner of the colony with the authority of absolute law, by authority of the Supreme Interstellar Court. "I hereby assume command of all colonial security forces. Governor Park Min-ho, you will stand down immediately. This is not a request. This is an order backed by the full power of human space." The voice was calm, professional, but carried the weight of 1,000 worlds. Park felt his carefully constructed empire crumbling round him like a house of cards. Meanwhile, in the detention facility, Torres was making his rounds when his communicator exploded with panicked chatter. Every security frequency was broadcasting the same message: "Stand down. Cease all operations. Prepare for judicial inspection." "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Officer Kim Dae-ho, one of Torres's most loyal subordinates. His voice shook with barely controlled fear. Torres's scarred face went pale as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. He had been a colonial security officer for 15 years, but he had never seen a full judicial fleet deployment. The last time it happened, an entire planetary government had been dissolved overnight. "All units, stand down." He barked into his communicator. "Repeat. All units stand down. Secure all prisoners, but do not harm them." "What's happening?" Officer Lim-hai gasped, panic creeping into his voice. "Are we under attack?" "We're finished," Torres whispered, his hands shaking as he clipped his communicator back to his belt. "The Supreme Court knows everything." High above the planet, Admiral Park Soon-ho coordinated the operation from the Justice's Hammer's Bridge. Through the massive view screen, he could see the Velta fleet maintaining their position round the colony. The alien ships moved like living things, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with patterns that seemed almost like heartbeats. Chief Justice, the Velta vessels are requesting communication. Reported Lieutenant Commander Li Jiyoung from the communications station. Put them through. Ji-won ordered. The view screen shimmered, and suddenly the bridge was filled with the ethereal presence of Captain Zethara. The ancient Velta-esque crystalline form was breathtaking, her body containing galaxies of light that swirled in complex patterns. Human Chief Justice, Zethara said, her voice creating harmonic resonances that made the ship's hull vibrate. We thank you for coming to aid our people. We have maintained position to ensure no corrupt officials escape justice. Captain, we appreciate your cooperation, Ji-won replied with a respectful bow. Our Marines are preparing to secure the detention facility and arrest those responsible for these crimes. The Song of Stars will sing of this day, Zethara replied. When humans and Velta work together, even the darkness cannot hide. The first wave of judicial Marines launched from the Justice's Hammer in assault shuttles designed for a rapid deployment. Each Marine wore powered armor that could stop plasma rifle fire and enhanced their strength. Tenfold, they moved with military precision, their mission clear. Secure the prisoners and arrest the corrupt officials the detention facility's automated defense systems tried to activate. But the Marines' electronic warfare specialists had already hacked into the colony's computer networks. Every door, every security camera, every weapon system was under their control. The facility's main doors exploded inward as the Marines breached the entrance. Their armor's lights cut through the dim corridors like blazing swords, and their heavy footsteps echoed through the metal halls. Torres stood in the main corridor, his hands raised in surrender. Behind him, his subordinates dropped their weapons and fell to their knees. They had seen enough combat footage to know that fighting judicial Marines was suicide. I surrender, Torres said, his voice barely above a whisper. We surrender. But the Marines didn't even slow down. They moved past the security officers like ghosts, their mission focused on the prisoners. Cell doors hissed open with mechanical precision, and suddenly the corridors were filled with freed Velta and human prisoners. Judge Kim Hanna emerged from her cell like a phoenix rising from ashes. Her prison clothes were wrinkled and stained, but her dignity remained intact. She walked with the measured steps of someone who had never forgotten her authority, even in the darkest circumstances. Officer Torres, she said calmly, approaching the man who had tormented her for days. You are under arrest for a violation of the Interstellar Justice Accords and lawful imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit genocide. Torres's legs gave out, and he fell to his knees. Judge Kim, I was just following orders. Following illegal orders is not a defense. Hanna replied coldly. Marines, place him in custody. The powered armor enhanced the Marines' strength, but they were surprisingly gentle as they secured Torres and his men. These weren't common criminals. They were prisoners of war, captured soldiers who had chosen the wrong side. Meanwhile, Governor Park Min-ho was making his desperate escape attempt. His private shuttle was fueled and ready, hidden in a concealed hangar beneath his residence. As the judicial Marine swept through the colony, he made his run for freedom. The shuttle's engine screamed as it lifted off, accelerating toward the edge of the atmosphere. Park's hands shook on the controls as he pushed the small craft to its limits. If he could just reach hyperspace, he could disappear into the outer rim territories where the law couldn't reach him. But he had forgotten about the Velta fleet. The Song of Stars detected the fleeing shuttle immediately. Captain Zethara's ancient wisdom told her exactly what the small craft represented. A corrupt leader trying to escape justice. Extend the harmony nets, she commanded her crew. The massive bioship's hull began to glow with new patterns, and suddenly the space round Park's shuttle filled with streams of living light. The Velta-tractor technology was unlike anything humans had developed. Instead of crude force fields, they used gravitational harmonics that gently but irresistibly pulled objects toward them. Park's shuttle was caught like a fish in a net, its engines useless against the alien technology. The craft was drawn slowly back toward the planet's surface, its occupant screaming in rage and desperation. "This is an outrage." Park yelled over the communication channels. The judicial officers boarded his shuttle. "I was protecting human interests. I was keeping the colony safe." Chief Justice Yoon Ji-won's voice cut through his protests like a blade. "You were protecting your own greed, Governor Park. You betrayed your oath, violated interstellar law, and committed crimes against sentient beings. Justice will now be served." As the corrupt officials were led away in restraints, the freed prisoners gathered in the detention facility's main corridor. Humans and Velta stood together, their shared suffering creating bonds that transcended species barriers. Hannah looked round at the faces surrounding her, some human, some alien, all victims of the same corrupt system. But in their eyes, she saw something that made her heart soar. Hope. "It's over," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the facility. "The nightmare is over." Outside, the twin fleets of human and Velta ships maintained their vigil, guardians of justice in a galaxy too often ruled by greed and hatred. But today, at least, the good guys had won. 3 weeks later, the most important trial in interstellar history began in a specially constructed courtroom on Kepler-4b. The building itself was a marvel of cooperation. Human engineering merged with Velta crystal technology to create a space that literally hummed with harmony. The walls were embedded with quantum crystals that glowed softly, creating an atmosphere of peace and justice. Judge Kim Hannah sat at the elevated bench, her midnight blue robes restored and gleaming with authority. She had spent the past weeks reviewing evidence, and what she had found sickened her. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. The courtroom was packed with observers from across the galaxy. Human reporters floated in, anti-gravity chairs, their cameras capturing every moment. Velta witnesses sat in special resonance chambers that allowed their harmonic voices to be heard clearly. Even representatives from other alien species had come to watch. Knowing that the outcome would affect interstellar relations for generations, this tribunal will come to order, Hannah announced, her voice carrying across the packed courtroom. The quantum crystals in the walls responded to her words, creating a soft chime that seemed to demand attention. Governor Park Min-ho sat at the defendant's table, his once proud uniform replaced by a simple grey jumpsuit. His face was pale and drawn, years in just a few weeks. Beside him sat his former security officers, Torres, Kim Dae-ho, and Lim Hayek, all looking like broken men. The defendants stand accused of crimes against both human and Velta law. Hannah continued, conspiracy to commit genocide, and lawful seizure of sovereign territory, systematic persecution of sentient beings, and violation of interstellar justice protocols. The prosecution was led by Commander Sarah Chen, a specialist in interstellar law who had flown in from Earth specifically for this case. She stood up, her movements precise and confident. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that these defendants orchestrated a systematic campaign of terror against the Velta people. They forged documents, fabricated terrorist threats, and imprisoned innocent beings for the sole purpose of stealing their ancestral lands." The first witness was Lee So-min, the geologist who had refused to falsify the mineral surveys. Her testimony was devastating. She described how Governor Park had personally threatened her family if she didn't cooperate with the cover-up. "He showed me photographs of my daughter at school," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "He said accidents happen to children who have parents who don't understand their place." The Velta witnesses were even more compelling. Elder Kethmar took the stand, his ancient crystalline form glowing with patterns that told the story of his people's suffering. Through a special translation device, his harmonic voice filled the courtroom with the sound of centuries of wisdom. For 50 generations, My people have lived in harmony with the singing stones. He testified, "We welcomed the humans as brothers, sharing our world and our knowledge. But greed poisoned their hearts, and they repaid our kindness with betrayal. The evidence room was filled with boxes of forged documents, false reports, and recorded communications between the conspirators." The prosecution played audio recordings of Governor Park discussing his plans to solve the alien problem permanently. "These creatures aren't human," Park's voice echoed through the courtroom. "They're obstacles to human progress. If we have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, so be it." The defense tried to argue that the defendants were protecting human interests, but their case crumbled under the weight of evidence. When Park finally took the stand in his own defense, he made everything worse. "I regret nothing," he declared, his voice filled with defiance. "I was protecting the future of humanity in this sector. These aliens were sitting on resources that could power 1,000 worlds, and they were too primitive to use them properly." Judge Hanna watched Park's testimony with growing disgust. This man had betrayed everything that humanity stood for: cooperation, justice, and the protection of the innocent. The trial lasted 2 weeks, with testimony from over 100 witnesses. The evidence was overwhelming, the guilt undeniable. When the time came for a sentencing, the courtroom fell silent. "Governor Park Min-ho," Hanna announced, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you are sentenced to exile on the penal colony of Titan 7, where you will spend the remainder of your natural life. Your crimes against sentient beings are unforgivable." Park's face went white, but he remained silent. Titan 7 was a frozen hell where the worst criminals in human space were sent to disappear forever. Officers Torres, Kim Dae-ho, and Lim Hayek, you will serve 20 years hard labor for your crimes. Perhaps in that time, you will learn the value of the lives you helped destroy. The sentences were carried out immediately. Park was taken away in restraints, his political career and his freedom gone forever. The corrupt officers followed, their uniforms stripped away and their badges of authority reduced to meaningless metal. But the trial's most important outcome wasn't the punishment of the guilty. It was the restoration of justice. The illegally seized lands were returned to the Velta with full reparations. The quantum crystal deposits would be jointly managed, with profits shared equally between the species. More importantly, the trial led to the establishment of the Interspecies Justice Protocol. Never again would a judicial officer be detained without proper authority. Never again would one species be allowed to systematically oppress another. Elder Kevmar approached Judge Hanna after the proceedings. The ancient Velta is crystalline, form pulsed with patterns of gratitude and hope. Your species shows great wisdom in choosing leaders like you, he said, his harmonic voice creating beautiful resonances in the courtroom. Perhaps there is hope for a true cooperation between our peoples. Hanna smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart that had nothing to do with the glowing crystals round them. Justice knows no species. Elder, only right and wrong. The years that followed proved her words true. New Bizon transformed from a den of corruption into a model of interspecies cooperation. Human and Velta children played together in parks built round preserved crystal shrines. The colony thrived as a beacon of what could be achieved when justice prevailed over prejudice. The quantum crystal mines became the most profitable operation in the sector, but more importantly, they became a symbol of what a species could accomplish together. Human engineering combined with Velta crystal singing techniques created mining methods that were both efficient and environmentally harmonious. Judge Kim Hanna's handling of the crisis became required study for all interstellar diplomats. The Kepler Protocol was taught in law schools across the galaxy, a reminder that justice must always triumph over greed. 5 years after the trial, Hannah stood on the observation deck of the new judicial station orbiting Kepler-440b. The planet below looked peaceful, its cities glowing with the soft light of quantum crystals. Chief Justice Yoon Ji-won joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Any regrets about how it all turned out?" Yoon asked, offering her friend the warm cup. Hannah smiled, accepting the tea and inhaling its fragrant steam. "None whatsoever. This is what we swore to protect. Not just human interests, but the interests of justice itself. Below them, the city hummed with life. Human and Velta citizens worked side by side. Their children attended integrated schools, and their scientists collaborated on projects that benefited both species. The quantum crystal spires that had once been sources of greed and conflict now served as monuments to cooperation and understanding. "You know," Yoon said thoughtfully, "I think this might be humanity's greatest achievement. Not conquering other worlds, but learning to share them." Hannah nodded, watching as a group of human and Velta children played in a park built round an ancient crystal shrine. Their laughter echoed across the city, a sound of hope that reached all the way to the stars. The galaxy was vast and often dark, filled with those who would choose greed over justice, hatred over understanding. But on one small world orbiting an orange star, 2 species had proven that cooperation was possible. They had shown that justice could triumph over corruption, that right could defeat might, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to stand up for what was right. It was a testament to humanity's greatest strength, not their weapons or their technology, but their courage to do what was right, even when it was difficult. The end. Judge Kim. Hannah felt the rough vibration of the transport shuttle as it descended through Kepler-440b's thin atmosphere. Through the small porthole, she watched the alien landscape unfold below. Strange purple vegetation dotted the rust-colored plains, and in the distance, crystalline formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning. This was her first time on a frontier world, and despite her extensive experience in interstellar lore, her heart raced with anticipation. The shuttle touched down with a metallic thud on the landing pad. Hannah adjusted her midnight blue judicial robes, the fabric embedded with microcircuits that displayed her credentials and authority across 7 star systems. At 35, she had already presided over more interspecies disputes than judges. Twice her age, her reputation for fairness had earned her respect from humans and aliens alike. As the shuttle doors hissed open, the alien air hit her face. It smelled of ozone and something sweetly metallic. The gravity here was lighter than Earth's, making each step feel like a gentle bounce. New Bizon stretched before her, a collection of gleaming metallic domes connected by covered walkways. The settlement looked prosperous, its solar collectors and atmospheric processes humming with quiet efficiency. Hannah had studied the files during her 3-day journey. The Velta were a peaceful species, their society built around harmony and shared resources. They had welcomed human colonists 50 years ago, even helping them establish the first settlements. But recently, tensions had risen over mining rights and territory disputes. That's why she was here, to mediate before the situation exploded into violence. She walked down the shuttle's ramp, her footsteps echoing on the metal surface. The orange sun cast long shadows across the landing pad, and she could see several Velta in the distance, their crystalline skin refracting the light in rainbow patterns. They moved with fluid grace, their tall, slender forms almost dancing as they worked. Judge Kim, a gruff voice cut through her observations. Hannah turned to see 3 men in colonial security uniforms approaching. Their faces were hard, weathered by years under the alien sun. The lead officer was a stocky man with a jagged scar running from his left ear to his jaw. His name tag read Torres. His 2 companions flanked him, hands resting on their plasma rifles. "Yes, I'm Judge Kim Hanna," she replied, extending her hand in greeting. "I assume you're here to escort me to the arbitration center." Torres ignored her outstretched hand. His eyes were cold, filled with a hatred that made Hannah's skin crawl. "You're under arrest for conspiracy against human interests." The words hit her like a physical blow. Hannah's training kicked in, keeping her voice steady despite the shock coursing through her system. "I beg your pardon. I am here under official mandate from the Galactic Justice Network. Check your communications. You should have received confirmation of my arrival." "Save it for someone who cares," Torres spat, his scarred face twisting with disgust. He gestured to his men with a sharp hand motion. "Alien lovers like you are exactly what's wrong with the colonies. You people sit in your comfortable offices on Earth, making decisions about worlds you've never seen, siding with creatures that aren't even human, Officer Torres. I strongly advise you to reconsider," Hannah said, her voice carrying the authority of yours in the judicial system. "Interfering with a sanctioned arbitrator is a serious crime under interstellar law. You could face court-martial." Torres laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the landing pad. "Court-martial? Lady, you're about to learn how we handle things out here on the rim." He nodded to his subordinates. "Take her." Before Hannah could react, energy restraints crackled to life round her wrists. The blue-white bands of force were designed to subdue even the strongest alien species, and they sent numbing shocks through her arms. Her judicial communicator, a device that could reach Earth in seconds, was torn from her belt. "You can't do this." She protested as Torres raised his boot and brought it down hard on the communicator. The device shattered, its emergency beacon dying with a final electronic whine. "Just did." Torres growled. "Get her out of my sight," as the officers dragged her away from the landing pad. Hannah caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. Near the colony's main gate, several Velta were being herded into transport vehicles by more security officers. They're usually bright. Opalescent skin had dulled to a sickly grey, a sign of extreme fear in their species. Some were children, their small forms trembling as they were separated from their parents. "What's happening to them?" Hannah demanded. "Same thing that's happening to you," one of Torres's men replied with a cruel smile. "They're getting what they deserve for plotting against the colony." The transport vehicle was a converted mining hauler, its interior cramped and poorly ventilated. Hannah was shoved inside with a dozen other prisoners, mostly Velta, but a few humans as well. The journey to the detention facility took 20 minutes, through the colony's outskirts, past abandoned mining equipment and half-constructed buildings. The detention facility itself was a converted asteroid mining station. Its corridors narrow and oppressive. The walls were bare metal, stained with rust and age. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The air recycling system wheezed and groaned. Struggling to keep up with the facility's population, Hannah was processed like a common criminal. Her robes were taken away, replaced with a grey jumpsuit that smelled of industrial disinfectant. Her personal belongings were confiscated, including her judicial seal, a crime in itself under galactic law. The cell they threw her into was barely large enough for people. But it already held 3 Velta civilians. Their melodic voices filled the small space with mournful harmonies, a sound that seemed to make the very walls vibrate with sadness. "Why are you here, human?" asked one of the Velta, its compound eyes reflecting the harsh lights like multifaceted jewels. Despite its alien features, Hannah could hear the pain in its voice. She sat down on the hard metal bench, her mind racing with the implications of what had happened. This wasn't just corruption, it was a systematic violation of everything she had sworn to uphold. "Because I believe in justice," Hannah replied, her resolve hardening like steel. And someone is going to pay for this. The first 3 days in the detention facility felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. Hannah's body ached from sleeping on the hard metal bench. And the processed food they served barely qualified as edible. But what disturbed her most was the constant sound of suffering echoing through the corridors, Velta voices singing their death songs, human prisoners crying out in pain, and the heavy footsteps of guards who seemed to enjoy their work too much on the 4th morning. A new prisoner was thrown into her cell. Lee Soman was a middle-aged, human woman with dirt under her fingernails and exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She wore the uniform of a colonial geological survey team, but it was torn and stained with what looked like purple alien soil. "What did you do too? And up here?" Hannah asked quietly, making room for the newcomer on the overcrowded bench. Lee glanced round nervously before speaking in a whisper. "I refused to falsify mineral surveys. Governor Park Min-ho wanted me to report that certain Velta territories were barren, but they're not. Those lands are sitting on the richest quantum crystal deposits I've ever seen." Hannah felt her blood run cold. Quantum crystals were the most valuable resource in the galaxy, essential for powering faster-than-light drives. A single crystal could power a starship for decades. How rich are we talking? "Enough to make this backwater colony one of the wealthiest planets in human space," Lee replied, her voice barely audible. "The governor's been planning this for months. He's got half the security force on his payroll, and the other half are too scared to speak up." One of the Velta prisoners, an elderly being named Kethara, shifted closer to listen. Its crystalline skin had taken on a deep blue hue, which Hannah had learned indicated profound sadness. "The human speaks truth," it said in heavily accented standard, "for generations. My people have guarded the singing stones. We thought your kind wished to share the land, not steal it." "Singing stones?" Hannah asked. "What you call quantum crystals," Kethara explained. "They sing with the energy of creation itself. My ancestors built their shrines round the most powerful ones, believing they were gifts from the Star Mothers." Lee nodded grimly. "That's why they're destroying the shrines. They're not just religious sites. They're marking the locations of the richest deposits, as if summoned by their conversation." The sound of heavy machinery rumbled through the facilities. Walls. Hannah pressed her face against the cell's narrow window, which offered a view of the colony's outskirts. In the distance, she could see massive earth-moving equipment tearing into the landscape. Bulldozers and plasma cutters worked round the clock, reducing ancient Velta monuments to rubble. The most heartbreaking sight was the Velta families gathered at the edge of the destruction zone. They stood in perfect formation, their voices raised in harmonious songs that seemed to make the very air vibrate. It was their way of mourning, Kethara had explained. They believed that their ancestors' spirits lived within the crystalline structures, and destroying them was like murdering the dead.